How's it going, guys? Today we're back on the 1194 project. Now, if you haven't seen what has brought this tractor to this point, you should probably go back in my channel history a little ways and see. But today we're starting to go over the crest of the hill and go back towards a running engine again. Today we're going to get the flex hone out, and actually I already have it out. And we're going to take the rusty, crusty bore. It's not all that rusty, but it's glazed and it's dirty, and we're going to clean it up. I just scuffed this one with it enough to clean it up so I can get a measurement with my bore micrometer and make sure that there's no funny like egg-shaped spots or anything, and there's not too much ridge in it. There's a little bit on the sides, but there's not much on the front and back. But I'm going to take a look with the bore mic, make sure there's nothing weird that the pistons were clanking side to side or hard or anything. And I'm going to hone it out, and we're going to put 20 over rings in it, but we're going to gap those rings and make sure they fit perfectly, because we're going to end up maybe a couple thousandths over when we're done here, but we're not going to be quite up to 20 over. So I'm going to show you guys the flex hone thing again. If you haven't seen it, I used it in one previous video, but we have a whole bunch of tractors that use the 4-inch size, so we went ahead and bought, I wrote it on there, 4-inch one. Most of the David Browns use like a 3 and 9 something. I'll write it in the video. I don't remember, but they're just shy of 4 inches. So without further ado, let's get after it. So after the first round of honing, looks pretty good. They cleaned up good, got a good pattern on them. First cylinder looks pretty good. Second cylinder, again, looks pretty good, other than right there. I don't know if you guys can see it. There's a little scratch line at the bottom there. Cylinder 1 had one on this side. There's a couple little ones. You can just barely feel them. And might be one there. So with the bore mic, I measured the bore. It is 939, 940, 0.939, 0.940. They're supposed to be 0.939. So Dad's actually going to order a round of parts from England tomorrow, because when we get parts, we like to get a whole bunch at once. That way you only pay the shipping on one pile, regardless of whether it's, you know, one box of standard rings, because we have a whole bunch of 20 and 40 overs. We don't have any standards at the moment. So he's going to order some standards, some gaskets and other things we need, and we're going to think about it overnight and make sure there's nothing else we need. And I'm going to go ahead and get a set of sleeves and pistons for my 900 diesel I'm working on coming up here. And that'll be the next one in this tractor spot in this shop. When this one's done, will be that one, and or this 600 here, or there's a pile of things that used to be 2 600s out there. They might be in here too, but the 900's coming. I'd like to get it rebuilt before pulling season, but I'm going to hit these bores again with the hone, clean them up a little more, and then we'll have to wait till our parts get here for the rings and continuing assembly. So the deck on this block, we're not getting it surfaced, we're not getting it bored. I ran the hone in it. Now that it's honed, we're not getting the deck done. It's staying in the tractor. And so what we can do to kind of bring this back around a little bit, because it's not bad, but you can see there and there and there and there, those 4 center threaded holes, the thread's pulled out on a little bit. So what you can do is take like a knife sharpening stone, or a chuck stone as we call them in the tool and die trade, put a little diesel fuel on it, like out of this line right here that conveniently is hooked up to the fuel tank. A little bit of diesel, or thin oil if you don't have diesel, and just kind of go around the whole top of the surface here after you've scraped your gasket and stuff off. Just make sure there's no burrs or anything sticking up, because that'll make your head gasket not last real long. Like right there, you can see it's shiny, but it's just around the hole, so that thread did pull out a little bit. That one's definitely sticking up. You'll get a feel for it. You just kind of want to be real careful in here. The earlier tractors, they would crack in here between the sleeves, and you don't want to create any low spots there. It'll leak between the cylinders, so just be very gentle there. The rest of this, just put, like as much pressure as you'd put there, but I'm just holding on to it with 2 fingers so I don't drop it. Just kind of go around, make sure it's all smooth. Might have to work on those a couple extra passes. They're better than they were. Don't drop your stone, because that's bad, and then you'll have to polish the crank when it hits the stone on its way through. Anyway, so that's what you're going to do there, and then just wipe it off real quick. Make sure you didn't leave any scratches or spots. Right there looks pretty good though. Nice and shiny, a little bit of dark finish there. And on to cleaning the inside of the engine. So if you're wondering, a bunch of these head stud holes are part of the water jacket. So don't clean them out with compressed air, because then you'll do that. And I had these bores clean already, and now they're not clean. Alright, now that I've got the crank journals and the bores cleaned up as best I can, now it's time to go over to the pistons. They're dirty. I'm not really going to worry about the top too much. I'll wipe it off, pull all the old rings out, and I'll wipe the bearing surface down here off, and then I can load the new bearings as well, but I'll go through and do all the rings and go back and do all the bearings. We got the rings from Agroline. That's the part number for them. And then the bearings, these ones must have got oil spilled on them or something recently. But there's the bearings. And then these, I might have showed you guys these in another video. So these are pieces of air hose, and we use those to protect the crank from hitting these rod bolts as you set the rod down through with the piston from the top. Because unless you have 2 people, it's hard to guide the bottom and the top while you're using a ring compressor all at the same time. So we use those to help protect the crank from getting hit off of these as you set them down in. I'll show you guys that again though here in a minute, or tomorrow, or whenever I get to it. I'm not sure if it's going to be tonight, because with the way the wind's blowing, I may not have electricity and lights in here shortly. I don't know. So here's our piston. I'm going to throw 2 of the nuts on here just so I don't lose the cap or drop it while I'm moving this around. Double check. Yep, 113, 113. Those are the same, because sometimes a guy will drop them while he's taking stuff apart. It's not good. So normally when I'm taking rings out, they're bad enough that they will just explode. It appears as though these really weren't all that bad, because it's just spinning. It's not breaking. Like, I really had to pull on that one. Normally when I'm taking them apart, they just go snap, crackle, pop if they're not already broken. Wow. And if you're not reusing the rings, that works just fine. Generally, I don't take rings out if I'm going to reuse them. The oil ring does not, however, like to explode near as easily. So you kind of got to do it the right way. Pinch your finger in the process. Kind of work it around. It might break. Yep, there it goes. And I did check, it does come with an oil ring as well, so we are good. The oil ring groove is actually relatively clean. What you can do though is take your, oh, there's still a piece of ring in there. Take one of your broken rings. You can go through and scrape out all the junk that gets down in here. A little more time has gone by since I've been able to get back to this. I got a really bad aluminum splinter in my finger from cleaning out these ring grooves, and then I quit for a while. In the meantime, the 600's up there. We have our custom high clearance 1194 in right now. We're flipping the wheels out to get a little more. We're going to 80 inches wide, I believe, instead of whatever we were at to go down 2 rows. I think we're setting up to straddle 3, which is going to work out better for us switching to 5 rows, 5-row planter instead of 4-row planter. But we realized this final drive that was on there was like bad, like really bad. Like this bearing was gone. So, and it wasn't from a lack of oil, as you can see, because it was all over the floor. It just went because it's old, I guess. So that's that. That's what's going on over here. Today we're going to get the pistons cleaned up, ringed up, and maybe I'll get them in tonight. I don't know. Just see how the day goes. So guys, what I just did there on the hyperlapse, time lapse, whatever you want to call it, I put oil on the rings and the piston. I put assembly lube on the bearings. I put these little pieces of air hose on the bolts, so when I drop it down in there, I don't bang the crank with these bolts, the studs sticking down through, and it helps guide it down over the journal easier. Then I set it on there. I used our ring compressor pliers, which these might be the cheapest things known to man, but we wanted to prove the concept of these things before we went and bought an expensive pair and then didn't like them. But I like these pretty well. Dad seems to like them, so we may make some improved ones in the future. Then I used my mallet and that. Got the rings compressed, tapped it down in, and then got this down on the crank. And then I have to rotate the crank holding down on this to be able to get in there easily and tighten the bolts up. And especially you have to get it to the bottom of the stroke to be able to torque them, because there's not room to get the cap in there on the front and the back cylinder on these 3 cylinders, because of the way the counterweights are. You have to pull it to the bottom or somewhat to the side to be able to get the cap up there. And then it's hard to get a torque wrench up in there the whole way, so bring them to the bottom of the stroke when you torque them. I'm going to go get the specs for that, torque that one, and then we'll do the same thing on these other 2 cylinders. Sorry you guys didn't get to see the rest of the piston assembly and installation. My phone battery died, and one thing that people don't always understand about YouTube is it takes like 47 times longer to film something on YouTube than just to actually do it, because you got to get the camera mounts, and then you got to double check the camera angles and make sure everything's good, and you got to talk to the dog and make sure, you know, the dog is behaving. So I was just playing in the snow. I came back inside, and yeah, it's a lot of work. Also, we tried that 990 final drive on here, and physically it fits. However, there's a couple of things that don't let it work. So these have drum brakes inside of here. So there's your drum on your input shaft. That's what this tractor has as well. The big, like the 1494s and I think 1410s and stuff, they had rotors in there, but those are a little different. The 1194 and the 990 have a different size drum. Not to say we couldn't change the shoes, but we wouldn't want unequal braking. And the bearings weren't bad. They're just out of adjustment because they're taper rollers. You can still adjust them. So we're just going to get this seal here and adjust the bearings and rebuild this one. The other thing is that one doesn't have all the mounting holes drilled in it that these ones do. And being this tractor is already very custom, the more holes the better, because we have ROPS on here, and we're going to make a bracket mount that goes on here for the upper part of the ROPS and to fasten the lower parts better. And we're going to mount some fender components, I won't say whole fenders, off of 1210, the box style fenders. We're going to mount that on here. This 1194 here was a standard height one, so that's a kind of low one. There's a low one, which we don't have any of. We have a standard height one, and then this one was a standard height one. Motor got blown up in it. We rebuilt it, put 1394 final drives on it, put it on 11.238s, put a 990 PTO box on it so we can have 2-speed PTO. We put 990 high clearance kingpin assemblies in it. I'm not sure what the dog's doing over there. She's singing or something. And these are 1394 finals, as I said. That way it wouldn't do like 30 miles an hour with that big a tire on it. We deleted the drawbar to get some extra clearance. So we had to do some custom mounting of these arms as well. And then we made this bracket here so the pump doesn't rattle around as it's spinning. On our other tractor, it mounts to the drawbar, but since we deleted that, we don't have it. And then these ROPS we moved off another tractor as well. We haven't got the upper parts put on yet, but that's that.